The creator of the Gulag No project, Vladimir Osechkin, is in direct contact with us. Vladimir, hello. Greetings, Vadim. We welcome all our dear viewers and subscribers. When Donald Trump in his message called Putin crazy or crazy, it sounded English. Has he actually stopped further attempts at the negotiation process, or is it just such a linguistic game? Here is your impression of these posts. I think it's more of a game for the internal audience, for the public. Of course, he understands perfectly well that Putin is not crazy because, well, in fact, it would be such an excuse. You see, he's gone mad. That's why he's doing all this, and therefore let's not condemn him to life imprisonment for war crimes, crimes against humanity, but let's send him to a psychiatric hospital where he will be cured a little bit, and then he will generally come back. This is the story of how to mitigate the situation, diffuse it, how to explain to everyone that what is happening resembles a farce for several months now. It's like this, in fact, to laugh it off. It is unlikely that Trump himself thinks Putin is crazy. It is unlikely that he would send his special representative to a madman. No, of course, the truth is much more severe and cruel. Putin is unpleasant, an unpleasant person, a dictator, a terrible dictator, a bloody murderer. But Trump cannot call him a murderer. Here is an elderly Joe Biden, on whom a lot of people were teasing, often in vain, yes, succumbing to some fakes of Ross propaganda, which were cut out there, some files were thrown in. But Joe Biden, despite his age, despite a very serious illness, which has now been announced, he had enough powder in his flasks to call Putin a murderer outright. And Trump still has problems with this. Perhaps somewhere, when they give him a bottle with the elixir of courage, we will see more decisive statements. So far, this is just an attempt to beat the situation. No, of course, Putin has not gone mad. He is implementing for the fourth year in a row cruel, insidious plans, treacherous plans to seize the territory of Ukraine. It is advancing step by step, sending hundreds and thousands of stormtroopers from among former prisoners, mobilized, contract soldiers and so on to slaughter almost every day. And there is no end to this war today. And Trump can't call a spade for a number of reasons. Unfortunately, no, Putin is not in the refrigerator and is not crazy. This person is very calculating, very smart. It is in many ways a genius, but it is certainly an evil genius. So far, we see here some dances with tambourines around, with calls for all the good against all the bad. We are not seeing any decisive actions today. Putin understands this very well. He also has the Foreign Intelligence Service, the growth of cooperation, the SFR, and the analytical centers of the EFSO and the FS, which clearly show him what those who are trying to criticize and stop him are ready for, and what they will never do. He knows this, so he's rushing forward, rebuilt the economy. In many ways, today she is imprisoned in the war. A huge number of industries have been formed, including People for drones and so on. Certainly not without the help of a Chinese partner for the purchase of components and so on. And all this is starting to fly to Ukraine with greater intensity and destroy buildings, kill human lives, take human lives. So I hope that at least in the near future, this progress in Trump's position will be completed, and we will see some kind of epiphany. And he will start calling things by their proper names. I think there's only a week left until that moment. A few days ago, you told us about how a unit of the Russian army is coordinated and connected through what? Then you mentioned, including telegrams. Just yesterday, the news came out that in one of the drones, there was a note from a Russian, apparently either an engineer or a drone operator, in which information was transmitted to Ukraine. through what drones are coordinated, through telegrams, through a bot in a telegram, and how. It turns out that this is what you, in fact, were talking about, has already been placed at the disposal of the Ukrainian special services. Yes, that's right. Telegram services are actively helping the armed group of troops, the united group of troops of the Russian Federation in the occupied territories today. And this service and Starlink are now massively supplied in Donetsk, purchased at the crooked schemes, through intermediaries, through nominees in Europe. And yes, they have high-speed internet, satellite internet, they have streaming video, and Telegram with Discord, and they are helped in this. In other words, in fact, those services that seem to be under the jurisdiction of the West, the owners and managers of these companies are located in the territory of the West, and it is possible to take decisive measures here, to block at least this. So far, we are only seeing these publications, but I think that in the coming days, we will now publish a fairly large array of data from the correspondence of a number of units of the Russian army, which will clearly show how this happens and how these services help coordinate the actual murder of people, the murder of Ukrainians. Putin met with entrepreneurs yesterday. Have you paid attention to the composition? These are not the top 10 Forbes, but people often unknown to the general public. And there was a proposal from representatives of one of the Russian companies to strangle Microsoft, Zoom, and other services a little. Putin reacted very vividly to this. We can assume that the issue was agreed upon, because this is how it usually happens in the Kremlin. And he said strangle, strangle, strangle. Well, in other words, he said it all several times about the it of Western IT companies. Do you have any information about why this meeting took place in general, why it was necessary to say it all and voice it in this way? Well, it is obvious that the pause that Putin took, expecting some kind of détente with Trump, the United States, it is obvious that this pause ended for him, too, by and large nothing. In other words, the only thing he won was time, a few months, when many issues related to the support of Ukraine were delayed in the West. Now, yes, the gain in time is gradually letting go of the reins and returning to the rhetoric that was a few months ago, when there were no negotiations and there was not even a hope that something would happen. That's it today. The go-ahead is given. They will continue with renewed vigor. And as for those verbs that he uses related to violence, but these are sadists at heart. Strangle, hammer, wet in the toilet. This is absolutely the logic of a Chekist, Spshnik, KGB officer of the middle level, where violence, the use of violence against undesirables is one of the main methods. It is clear that now there will be another round of repression, another wave of repression in Russia. Because they took some pause, now they will continue. And why was the meeting needed with entrepreneurs, but once again to demonstrate to the West that you can impose sanctions, and your companies can leave, and we ourselves with a mustache, we will cope without you, we will fix everything that needs to be fixed. We will do it ourselves there on the knee firm, roughly now I will say, yes, from shit and sticks. That's what they do. But in principle, if we are not talking about evolution, not about some long research with the search for medicines that help firm very complex diseases, but if the task is simply to collect something that will fly there with a grenade or a shell and explode, self-destruct, killing a certain number of people, that's enough primitive technologies, then they succeed in this. We have already reformatted the work of a number of production facilities and shopping centers, and other large premises for the assembly site, where just from these Chinese components on the knee, all this is quickly done, so that the armed forces have hundreds of drones for a daily attack on the territory of Ukraine. That's what he's betting on.
делает ставку.
And in principle, yes, the economy today is supported by the war. That is, if the war suddenly stops today and all this gang comes back, then there will, of course, be a surge in unemployment, banditry, crime, epiphany. There will be a lot of dissatisfied people. Therefore, yes, he is in a very difficult situation where it is easier for him to go forward, even under the threat of possibly introducing a new package of sanctions. That's how it's formed now, rather than stop. And plus, he has a clear understanding that he has a fairly large amount, not in Russia, of course, but he rules Russia. He has a fairly large amount of resources, cheap resources, oil, gas, metals, and so on, which are still finding their buyer, consumer, and he continues to receive petrodollars. And the global players who actually make decisions, as I see it, are not ready to give up on this yet. With the former media manager of the Prigozhin holding, I remind you, this Patriot holding was like this. Maybe many have already forgotten. They asked to be sentenced to 10 years and 4 months in a penal colony for extortion of a former colleague, now Deputy Alexander Malkovich. And what is going on with the former Patriots holding company, with the assets of Yevgeny Prigozhin and his people? Because it was one of the most important structures after Concord, which brought money to his numerous empire. Quickly, by the way, destroyed. In short, one word is a toad viper, and if we develop this idea, then of course, yes, Prigozhin's right hand strangles his left hand, or holds it by the throat. They actively wet each other. Malkovich jumped away from Prigozhin, falling on the embraer in time, distanced himself back in June of the 23rd year. And Ilya Gorbunov was just one of those who were the brain center of this campaign to Moscow. He and his teams prepared a huge number of different trips of Yevgeny Prigozhin to the regions. We will arrange meetings there. All of this even resembled, in a sense, the presidential election program, although it was not about elections. But the task was to raise about 1.5 million indifferent people, those who have sympathy, and those who are on the side of Prigozhin PMC Wagner, so that they too rushed in pickups, in large cars with PMC flags Wagner, on the 23rd of June of the 23rd year. Gorbunov, of course, supervised many media attacks. Ilyusha Gorbunov and his colleagues have done a lot to try to discredit the Gulag in some way. No, in some way, it means attacking us. He and Prigozhin together thought over the history of this Gulag project, yes. When we exposed the scheme of sending prisoners to the Wagner PMCs in the summer of 2022, and they, in contrast to us, in contrast to the Gulag, came up with this Gulag channel, where they would post such bravura videos where former prisoners with machine guns, in military uniform, with these skulls on their chests, they advertise how great they are fighting, how much money they are paid, what medals they have, and so on. In general, but here, yes, I do not know, there is a snake biting its tail. This circle has closed. The circle of this toad viper, it is right before our eyes. Now one part of the system is devouring another part of the system. In general, just a few days ago, I was thinking about the events that are happening right now. I think that now, probably, perhaps one of the top Russian-speaking speakers would be right now. That's if Yevgeny Prigozhin would be somewhere and could comment on everything that is happening. I think it would be simply impossible to imagine a greater critic and whistleblower of Putin and the Putin regime on the internet today. He would have watered it with slops, if of course he would have been at a great distance. And so, in general, yes, Prigozhin's empire has collapsed, and now they are wetting each other. Malkovich ran to buy the FS and helped them close Gorbunov. I think that they are waiting, or have already received, or will receive in the near future from Gorbunov, a lot of interesting things from the point of view of testimony. No one destroyed or burned the materials of the criminal case in an armed rebellion. All of this lies and can be reanimated at any time in the same way, and Surovikin and a number of other high-ranking Russian generals can become defendants. It's just that the FS doesn't need it yet, and so everyone is quiet. But if something starts somewhere, then the testimony of both Gorbunov and Malkovich, all of this will be used. And so yes, the propagandist closed the propagandist, who will be the first to reach the foundry there, to the Vshniki. Well, in this case, Malkovich was the first to rat on Gorbunov. Although both are real scoundrels. Well, let's continue to monitor how everything develops, both inside the vertical and outside the vertical, and even across the ocean from the vertical. Thank you. Vladimir Osechkin, the author and creator of the Gulag No project, was in direct contact with us today. All the best and goodbye. Thank you very much, Vadim. And of course, everyone has a peaceful sky over their heads, but first of all, a peaceful sky for Ukraine. And the soonest closure of the sky, and providing Ukraine with an exhaustive, sufficient number of air defense systems that will protect Ukraine and all Ukrainians from what is happening now these days, and from what will happen in the very near future against Ukraine. And yes, let's do everything possible in our place to put an end to this vile war. All the best.